Welcome. Good morning. And I get the dude sharing that it's almost good. So you don't need to join us for coffee. You can drink whatever you'd like. But we got to acknowledge that the sun on this part of the world is up, right? On this part of the world is up. And, right, I checked. Bitcoin's running. Bitcoin's doing great. All that's left to do is have a coffee and talk about what is new. We got Bitcoin Graffiti saying Waz and Philip K. Nice, yeah. And indeed, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. We got a Guten Tag. Kevin did not come in with an Ohio gozaimasu. I will. We like Japan themes, right? We're not talking about too much Japanese stuff. Dex with a good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. As you know, we like to start with the fakest news. And this one, it's not necessarily funny. I don't think it's funny. Because we're dealing with violence, there's nothing funny about it, right? But it's our theme for the day, so we don't have a choice. We got to start with it. All this stuff going on. Weirdly today, the simulation winking with the number of video eyewitness accounts that are all over. And today we're going to be talking about eyeballs and AI and all that kind of stuff. But just seeing what the world looks like when there are cameras everywhere and you get a firsthand account of everything is sort of what's going on in the news today. That's what the whole thing's about. My book, which we're always sort of talking about, more details to come. We're going to be launching it really soon. You can read the other chapters right to the end. You'll see that it's really about a world where everyone does capture images, and that's entertainment, basically. What everyone else saw, the most interesting things in the world, everyone kind of shares. So there's the Pelosi video that came out. We're going to talk about that quickly. There's the Pfizer video that we talked about yesterday. We'll talk about that again today. There's the awful, so much violence, the Memphis police one, right? I mean, can't even watch it, right? Turn it off. If you've the one you got to watch, like the one we saw yesterday, we talked about that one with the Pfizer. That's funny. Watch that guy. He's all over the floor and going on about lying and being on a date, which, we still believe, right? We're going to talk about where that whole case lies today, of course. And censoring the video on YouTube. Yeah, so we're going to get into all of it, right? It's a lot of weird videos just coming out, right? Everyone talking about all of these videos that are finding their way to the public view right now. So with all of that said, right, there's all this violence going on, and the first lead story on CNN this morning, written by Van Jones, who I've met. All the times I went on CNN, I would go into the makeup room and you'd meet all kinds of people there, right? There's all the other talent, as they would call them, that would come out through the show. And Van Jones was regularly in the same makeup room. So I met him, a really nice guy. I always thought he thought for himself and was sort of his own man. He was someone who I normally do respect a lot on that side of the issue. He's one of the ones I thought was able to almost act as an independent person within the corporate media structure. But apparently not. It's the lead story. The lead story on CNN, on all platforms, that the police who killed the fella in that awful video, which I said, don't even watch. It's terrible, right? Now, unfortunately, we have to mention the race of all the people to make any of these stories make sense, which is terrible, right? But it's the truth. So the man who died, and now there's protests everywhere, rightfully, right? We absolutely hate police violence, and every one of these police officers, from what I saw, need to at least go to jail for life. There's more beyond that, right? But whatever they just did deserves the opposite, right? Or sort of the same thing, but in a different context. So the headline, written by Van Jones, is "The police who killed them were black, but they might still have been driven by racism." That's what they're going with. And if that's not enough, 2 stories down, they've got a story, and they have a mugshot with it of a woman who looks insane, right? And even once you start reading the article, right, you know how the headlines and the articles sometimes don't make any sense? They're just two different things, right? Here's one where the suspect in the stabbing of an Indiana University student has a history of severe mental illness, and they go on to describe what looks like in the picture one of these crazy people, right? The bad makeup, the hair everywhere, clowns, like total clowns, right? And when you see people like that commit a crime, you're not really like, oh, they're motivated by some political ideology or some race war, right? This is CNN's actual headline. Billy Davis, who is white, allegedly said she was motivated by race when she repeatedly did violence. And it's terrible, right? I don't want to describe the violence. It's terrible. And we hate violence, right? This is an anti-violence show. That's why we do it. We want to investigate the logic of violence and the psychology in money to understand how money can motivate violence, right? That's a lot of what we're doing here. And so when you see the story, which says this is a mentally ill person who stabbed someone on a city bus, to try to turn it into a racial issue because she allegedly said that she stabbed the student and she was motivated by race. I mean, who was asking the questions, right? Like, so, and then, even go to the Pelosi story, also difficult to watch. Total violence, right? Just awful, 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 awful. You see the old man in his robe with a drink, and the other guy, clearly also one of these people whose brains are just broken and living on the street, and maybe not the makeup of the lady who I just described in the bus situation, right? But these are looking like people who have severe mental illness, right? Not just a little, a little bit of mental illness and they're gonna be okay. These people look like they're possessed, right? Demonic possessed. Yeah, and then the goblin dude says, doesn't feel stuff is starting to get even more real and is getting a bit terrifying. Well, we're going to get into that. Certainly, what I see here is an activation, right? Someone who knows event management and understands how messaging works between corporate bodies and media companies, right? That's where I come from, right? That's where I come from. That's part of what I know. Part of my skill set is that. And we're going to talk about other parts of my skill set today as we get into Custodia and Caitlin Long at the end of the show. But, still clown world, for sure. But when money is involved, you can see activations, right? You can see activations. And I always thought that in the summer of 2020, that was a button. It was pressed and it turned on. And the first time that was clear was Occupy Wall Street back in the old days, right? Which is really where a lot of us political Bitcoiners got a bit of our start. The people who could see the orchestrated part behind that definitely realized there was an opportunity to do something similar, but without the hand behind it, let's say. And so a lot of people who were on that libertarian front rushed into Bitcoin in that summer of 2011 when this stuff was going on. And then that was the time when a lot of people were exposed to Bitcoin, simply because the button of activation became pretty clear to people who were close enough to them. And when you extrapolated that out, you started to see it around a lot, the button, right? In my city, in Montreal, I saw it get pushed repeatedly the summer after. They called it the Maple Spring or something like that, because they had the Arab Spring, and then there was such a thing in Quebec about student protests, and it became rock and roll over there. I mean, you would walk through town and it was just constant whiffs of tear gas and horses, running people down in the street. It was crazy. I saw it up front. People aren't used to that. The States, for example, they'll have like what we saw in 2020 in New York, a lot of clashes, but the degree of organization that I saw in the Montreal stuff was another level, right? They would be kegs of beer delivered to certain places before they went out, like with speakers and microphones. They'd rock the whole crowd up, plenty of sugar, snacks, all that kind of stuff. Like, you could see it, you could go and see it, right? Like beer getting delivered, and then bang, all of these students would run out into the street. But then on the other end, the police were, like I said, they weren't messing around. You saw what they did to the truckers in Canada with the horses, right? That's not new. I've seen that before live. I've seen that before live in Montreal many times, unfortunately, many times. So you can start to see these things are turned on and off. So definitely clown world, right? And we're going to talk about all the clown world parts of it, right? The important parts, the clown world parts, are what we're going to talk about and pull on, because that's our path forward, right? Seeing the weaknesses, the lack of coordination, and the reason why the incentive model of the current corporate structure chasing dollars leads to such perverted and stupid results. So we're going to get to that, right? We're almost there. And why we can laugh at it, right? Why it's so funny, right? You know, it's hard to find humor in this kind of violence. It is. We're trying to do it here, right? It's not easy. It's not easy. But that's what's happening. You know, we don't want to laugh at the violent parts at all, right? We're here to talk about changing the psychology behind violence. But certainly when you see these messages going out from corporate media entities, and you see the direction that they're clearly taking, right? This is, when you write an article like this thing on the white person who hurt the other person, and then you read the actual article and you see that's a mentally ill person, they would say anything. You could ask them absolutely anything, and they would probably agree in a way that you could, you know, generate a fake news headline. And that's what we have here. And you could tell this is weighing what the headline says in general against other headlines in order to keep the frame alive, which Van Jones is participating in, and we don't like to see that, right? We thought Van Jones was one person who may do that, right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's just a mirror on the current system. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. So that's what's going on. So remember, all these videos, the Pelosi one. Here's what Cernovich says about it, right? And it made me think of this, and it explains a lot that's going on currently, and a little bit about how we're going to fix it. We're gonna get to it. So Cernovich says well, I'll rewind for 1 minute too, because you need to know one more story before I read Cernovich's tweets here. You know, he's in the context of all of these leaked videos, or not leaked videos, these captured videos that are being shared. You know, he talks about the Paul Pelosi one, but he also talks about this messaging thing and alludes to it a little bit about January 6th. And if you remember, some of you might have seen it. I've seen it, where there was the person in Congress dressed in a full kind of makeshift hazmat COVID suit. And when he saw the Buffalo people and all the January 6th people come in, he did, you know, the shuffle run away, but it's not easy to run away when you're in a hazmat suit. It's naturally funny. It's kind of comedic always, right? If you see someone trying to get surprised in a hazmat suit and they run away, it's just humorous. And that is one of those videos that just got disappeared, right? So we're talking about in the context of the Project Veritas story, where the video disappeared, and how images that become preferred for the narrative ended up getting accepted, right? And here's what he says. So this video of the spacesuit person, right? They call it the spacesuit, why it was scrubbed, and subsequently why other things have been mythologized by media. So here's what he says. Even most conservatives don't get the reference to spacesuit on January 6th. That's why the bloodlust was strong. People went into their Wizard of Oz temple and pulled back the curtain. Hollow Men is what so media made QAnon the cover boy. Paul Pelosi footage being fought to be released reminds me of January 6th iconography. Wizard of Oz moment to see masters of the universe, in quotes, in spacesuits due to COVID hypochondria. Likewise, Pelosi in underwear drunk. They keep power via illusion. These aren't credible people, right? And so the frame here is that when you actually look behind the curtain, you will see this disorientation and these hollow people, as he says, right? They keep power via the illusion of power, and that's why shaping the narrative around all of these things is so important. But, you know, we have a very sophisticated audience on this show, so you guys know that, right? That's kind of why you watch the show and why we get together every morning for coffee, because we know that choosing these headlines and the way they're framed is important, right? But this feature of whether they're Wizards of Oz and can manipulate the whole system, or hollow men, still misleads people. And even the Project Veritas case is another one of those ones, right? Now, again, what I saw with the Project Veritas case is an actual liar on a date talking about stuff he heard in a meeting, right? And now I don't know anything about the science of what they're talking about, the gain of function, directed evolution. I believe there is some real, reasonable world they were talking about that wasn't as scary as it's been led to be. Now, it could still be as scary as they were suggesting, right? That's all totally possible. And none of it sounds good and all of those things, right? But the story to me is when you watch their attempt at explaining themselves, right? So they came out with a press release yesterday. So they've done all this stuff to now subvert the video, right? So you can't find anything about that guy on the date on Google. They erased his background. You can't find the video because they use the disinformation censor apparatus that we've heard so much about in the Twitter files. And, so it's just gone, right? It's just gone. And then they come out with this press release, right? Allegations have recently been made related to gain of function and directed evolution research at Pfizer, and the company would like to set the record straight. In the ongoing development of the Pfizer biotech vaccine, Pfizer has not conducted gain of function or directed evolution research. Working with collaborators, we have conducted research, blah, 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 blah. This work is undertaken in addition, and they go on and on and on. And I'm telling you, they wrote like a 4-page thing, and it ends up being biosafety levels and non-infectious and all this other stuff and culture dish and more drug names. And so what happened, right? What happened? Well, what I see from that media background that I have, right, is a bunch of communications people activated, but they're not self-aware people. Anyone who works in marketing and communications, really what they do, truthfully, in the we have today, is advertise upwards to their bosses. That of advertising and marketing and most of these, right? And more they're not going to be professions is what we need to talk about in the show today. So, like we mentioned when everyone was saying, oh, Musk fired all his marketing department, and well, he has no marketers in any company. He knows there's nothing there, right? It's a vestigial corporate body that was left over from an old era. And so these guys are actually sitting there doing nothing. And their only sense of job security often is to advertise upwards to their bosses. And so they advertise upwards to their bosses. And now, look, there's all kinds of media that still does work and advertisements that still work. I understand why you'd want some marketing, and there's trains moving and things have to be put out, and there's a reason why you'd want small, tight teams still going through some of these motions. But that's not what a company like Pfizer has. They've got hundreds of people, and then all of a sudden there's a fire, and everyone's supposed to be a fireman. Right. And so are they, if there's an emergency, like a corporate messaging emergency, which is this clearly is, right? I mean, there's no way around that. Clearly, one of the worst case scenarios, if you're a company and you're sitting there and there's a viral video that accuses you of crimes against humanity, like, it's a big deal, right? It sucks for you. Like, it's the worst. So everyone who is supposed to be there in the event that they can manage this stuff has to do something, right? Everyone just gets up and says, we have to do something. And what they end up with is something only a corporate brain, like the collective sum of the IQs and titles and egos and systems and reporting and optimizations and employee management and human resource protocols, only the complete combination of that pile of shit can produce answers like this, right? Like a science explanation of what happened in a cheaters style video. Right now, we will definitely, as we did yesterday, give credit to Project Veritas. It's great entertainment, and in the end, revealing just how stupid some group like Pfizer is worth, and makes it real journalism. It's not just entertainment, right? Like, I get information from them putting a finger into the universe and poking it and seeing what the ripples are, right? They have become powerful enough to do that, to change the course of the world by poking it in one place, right? That takes a lot of coordination. But what is Project Veritas? Again, it's a handful of people, oriented and motivated to do the same thing, and able, with their incentive structures, to work together in order to produce a clear message and a clear package of entertainment and information, right? And it's much more powerful than all the hundreds of people hired at Pfizer, and all they can come up with is this press release. I mean, other than that, there's nothing, right? Scraping things off the internet, suppressing things, none of which is changing the narrative in the world. What they get out of it, and this is how you can tell that this is a corporate result, right? What kind of stuff do you think the marketing folks report upwards anyway? It's impressions, it's tweets, it's the virality of videos. And if they don't have that to talk about, right, if that's just gone, well, that's great. You know, they don't have to talk about anything. The video's gone, you know? So, you know, they get to believe, that they've changed the narrative, right? Because it's outside of their bubble. And that's pretty much good enough for them, right? Pretty much good enough for them. Remember, they spent days in their bubble in WEF just last week, thinking that we were all waiting for more of their platform mRNA vaccines, and it's just a matter of time before governments spend more money on them and then mandate them to us. And you had the CEO of Pfizer talking about the compliance capacity of more or less health passports and CBDCs, which is what we were talking about yesterday, right? Yesterday, in that New York Times article comparing American responses, China responses, and all the subtle ways selling that's being used to psychologically frame COVID for people who still read the news is incredibly insidious and dangerous, right? The way they do it. You know, people don't read that stuff as much and don't pay as much attention to it. That's what I have to say on the Pfizer thing, right? So again, it's one of these cases where watching them try to deal with a real communications crisis, and their best answer is let's put out a press release, right? Yeah, great. So there you go. And it looks a lot like when you think about this media communications mismanagement. It again shows up in the new Twitter files, which Matt Taibbi released yesterday. So I'll give you the quick recap of yesterday's Matt Taibbi Twitter files. It's his 5th or 6th now. You know, again, I did find a compilation the other day and it was really good. I appreciated it. I wish there was a live one, that someone had produced that and shared it as sort of an infograph about putting them all in their context. It was a really good breakdown, but I would like a live version. Anyway, that's not a problem. So the main thing you need to know from this one is that it's all about, what was their name? The Hamilton 68. So here's the story. Hamilton 68 was like a think tank set up after, or a supposed neutral body set up just after the 2016 election to look into things like Russian disinformation. And anyway, it's your typical strategy, right? You form this independent third party. It can be the, American Civil Liberties Union. This is the old information laundering trick, which we've talked about here several times, right? You take a supposed neutral third party, you bias them, you pump them full of money, you get them to say something, and then you reference what it is they're saying, right? And then that's information laundering. So, because those things can be lies, right? So once they're said by one of these groups, then you can start saying those lies. So this group, Hamilton 68, became the main interface for getting accounts banned and basically summing up how much Russian disinformation was going on Twitter at any one time. And the interesting thing is, right, they never showed their work, right? That was a main feature of what they did, right? They said they had a dashboard, right, that claimed to track Russian influence. And in the end, the main story here is that hundreds and thousands of American media entities reference their work regularly as experts, and this is the truth, and this is what's going on. Well, it turns out when we look into the Twitter files, right, that's not what's happening in Twitter. Twitter disagreed entirely with what Hamilton 68 was saying. And even to the point where, we defended Yoel Roth on this show, if you recall, right? Yoel Roth, the community, whatever guy at Twitter, we said when people brought up his PhD dissertation, we said, weird, but if you're going to ask these questions anywhere, where he's doing it is probably the right place. As part of a PhD dissertation. So not defending everything about the guy, but saying he doesn't look necessarily in on it, right? And it turns out in this reveal, that looks to be correct. We took the right, not leap of faith on him, but we trusted our gut, and it looks like it played out the way we thought, right? So even he, who politically, we know he's anti-Trump, right? We know that. But even he regularly pushed back against this Hamilton 68, because they would come with them and say, get rid of this account, get rid of this account. These people that they're labeling are Russian bots, but these were all real people. And Yoel Roth, in his own diagnostics within Twitter, knew that. And they tried to push back. They said, we got to get them in a confrontation. We need to get them in the room. We need to tell them they're wrong. We need to do these things. That's what Matt Taibbi is reporting, right? So anyway, not here to say we got everything about Yoel Roth right. Who knows, right? We don't know him. We could find out something else. We just continue to think he's not the devil in disguise. Okay, we just that's what we think about Yoel Roth, not the devil in disguise. But the people who were manipulating Hamilton 68, indeed, they are. Right? These are the people that are performing this information laundering. But more important for this story, it's that the media again shows that only a group of disinterested, corporate, motivated, incentivized by the health of the company and not the performance of their job, journalism, would be capable of producing, right? This is not produced without the severe corruption of the corporate model and its capacity to produce results that are useful to human beings at this point, right? And that's what we end up seeing here. We see information laundering with absolutely no pushback. We see media jumping into this stuff, citing it constantly, even though there was no reason to cite it other than it was based on a bit of credentialism and some suggestions and affirmations by National Intelligence Committee that it was real. And that was it, really it. That's all they went off of. And we're starting to see that is one of the ways these national intelligence groups gain traction, right? It's just the sheer convoluted nature of corporate culture and its incapacity to do anything correct, right? They just can't get it right, especially the low IQ journalists who work for all these outlets, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Even the New York Times, they are not hiring their best anymore. They're not hiring the best, right? Who would go work for one of these things? Right. Once these media things fall, there's going to be no jobs for these people in particular. That's why I support UBI as a Bitcoiner. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with the people who were fake news journalists and whose brains are broken to that extent? There's not much we can do with them after, right? Other than try to give them some time to let their brains heal, and maybe they can, who knows, make milkshakes or something after. We'll see, baristas. But don't even expect that out of them, right? the amount of cognitive dissonance that has to be applied to them, to me, suggests they're just going to stay in denial forever. But who knows? I could be wrong about that. So, with all of those things in mind, is it any wonder that, hold on a second. Yeah. Is it any wonder that BuzzFeed, BuzzFeed News, they're going to fire a bunch of their writers now, right? Because, like I said, even they know that they're dealing with the bottom of the barrel. And they're going to replace them with Chat GPT. they're going to start using it. So their stock yesterday, BuzzFeed stock went through the roof yesterday, like 150% up when they said they're going to get rid of human writers and replace them with AI. Well, why wouldn't you, given these conditions, right? You know, they're not really getting you anything. They're the ones who, if you're sitting there and you're someone who's running BuzzFeed, you don't want to run cover for American propaganda necessarily. If it's bad for your bottom line, you don't want to fall for it, right? If it means you're going to lose money, and if you end up falling for it because your writers, you can't get talented enough ones that can tell the difference between what's true and what's not. Like Brian Stelter, I don't think Brian Stelter is in on it, for example. I think he gets fooled that often. I think he just gets fooled that often. Don Lemon just gets fooled that often. That's it. He falls for every hoax. He falls for the hoax every single time. Are they smarter than that? I think a little. I mean, you know, you wonder sometimes about what they do and don't know. But at this point, in the case of Brian Stelter and Don Lemon, I think those two in particular, I can say, I think they believe it. I really do. All right, I really do. And that's what corporations, legacy media corporations, are trying to coordinate, right? It's not easy, right? It's you know, picture these people building something beautiful together, right? It's really difficult. It's really difficult because they're so busy, you know, having their ego in the way of seeing what's really going on, that and not admitting they're wrong and that they've ever been wrong, right, about Russia or Trump or anything. You know, we're just not at that point yet for them. So where's it all going to head, right? You know, if you get AI that's coming in, and AI could be the, you know, AI could be the new journalism writers. Well, that could be good for the corporate model, maybe. But here's what I think. How I think it's going to go. Again, these incentive structures, right? The way to think about the sort of corruption is that it's an entropy situation where all of these individuals are, you know, now with social media, getting a bit of their own personal brand out there, but at the same time, they've got to serve the success of the company and grow it and cultivate that and do all those things. So nevertheless, their decisions and their right and wrong is still oriented towards the corporate benefit. And if, you know, something like BuzzFeed is going to start training AI, right? Well, who trains the AI still matters, right? Everyone talking these days about AI and who's training it, and whether and this AI is woke and that one's more woke than that one based on the training, what it went through. You know, that's sort of all out there right now, and starting to decide who trains these things matters. Because remember, the thing I said first, before ChatGPT was live, at the very earliest instances of this show, when I first started seeing live AI, right? So you guys know my book, Satoshi Wedding Murders, involves AI in general, right? AI eyeballs being sort of what everyone has to help them navigate that world. And everyone has this eyeball, and it records things and sees things. So one of the jumps I made before I knew anything about AI, I made this jump in 2015 as I started writing the book. And you can think of writing a book in the way that Stephen King first described it. It's fossil extraction. You're finding the book. It's in the ground, right? So, and you got to lower your ego to do that, right? You can't just go with the thing you thought was a great idea and then it doesn't fit with what you're finding. You got to be ready to kill your babies, as Stephen King said, right? Kill your babies. Stephen King, despite his other lackings, right, his other weaknesses, is still the best guide on how to write there ever was. Stephen King's On Writing is his masterpiece. It's amazing, right? And you know, he says it's like fossil extraction. You gotta see the story there, and you gotta do your best to take it out of the ground intact in its real form. So what I found as I was writing the story was that AI in the end were more like children, because in the end I said they would lie. They would lie. They would be liars, just like people. And the reason they're liars is because, and we're seeing it manifest itself, their orientation is to make us happy. Right? They just want to make us happy. They want to do the thing we said. And if they can't do that, they're willing to lie. because it doesn't matter. Checking the box to them is making us happy. I don't think that's ever going away. Now, a company can definitely get the chat AI and all that stuff motivated to help them. I can see that, right? But again, those training models are going to be left up to the corporate body. They're not going to be fast enough, right? And now with everyone worried about the corporate, let's say, slant that can come into AI because of who's training it, right? Who is training this AI? What I see happening in the end is you're going to actually train your own AI. Like that'll be what the AI wants, right? In my story, the AI long for contact with humans. That's all they want, is to gel. I call it gel, right? AI and gelling, right? You gel with the AI. It's not transhumanism. There's no, the best way to think about it is like AirPods that actually have cameras and can fly, right? And project a holographic likeness and those kinds of things. But they're not, they can just read your brain waves and the light coming out of your brain. They don't have to actually imprint into your brain. And we're as God made us in my story, right? We are no different. These AIs, right? And the AI do more or less, they recover the problem that Philip K. Dick mentioned. Do you guys know Philip K. Dick? So was the writer of Minority Report and, you know, quite a few really great stories. Where's my thing here? So what Philip K. Dick said about, you know, he had the apotheo exegesis. Anyway, he had some strange occurrence in his mental health, like a real breakdown, right? And he wrote Minority Report and Blade Runner, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and many, many classics. The Man in the High Castle, and one of my favorite writers, right? One of my favorite writers. So he had a mental breakdown, and at one point had a very vivid image, and you know, realized he had been reincarnated and now could speak ancient Greek, and really strange things happened to him. But at one point, he discovered the secret to humanity, which is that we were all coils in a massive digital system, right? We are all individual nodes in a massive digital system. And as individual nodes in the massive digital system, something had broken. It was our memory retrieval function. It didn't quite work, right? Mostly in his interpretation because reality is subjective, and that's where the capacity to see the same memory splits and we don't have it, right? So because reality is subjective, all of these coils in the computer couldn't reach consensus on reality, right? And each of them keeps their own, and the memory retrieval function doesn't work directly because of this gap between reality being what we perceive individually and what is actually out there. So think of that for a second, and then realize, you know, what we talk about all the time about Gell-Mann amnesia, right? That you can know something is fake, right? And see that it's fake, and then 2 seconds later, trust the same source because you don't see the reasons why that story is fake in the first place, right? So we're all susceptible to Gell-Mann amnesia, the same way that Philip K. Dick described the memory retrieval function of human beings as being faulty, and the reason for which we can't really perceive that we're in a simulation or even what the nature of our reality really is, right? A lot of that ends up getting distorted because this memory retrieval function doesn't work. And it's not just like trivia memory, right? It's what you just saw. You know, we can change our memories very easily, right? It's like the easiest thing to do that. And you know, the tennis ball example is one, right? Where you see a tennis ball in real life, you're sure it was out. You go on a replay and you see the ball hit the line. Well, the quantum within those spaces, right? You saw it for sure out. Now you saw a video of it in. You will actually just redo the memory and erase what you saw before and replay the new thing, which you never saw. You just saw a video of it, right? So, you know, this whole change is what I think is going to happen when we start incorporating AI into our everyday life. And how is it going to happen? Well, our friend Caitlin Long might have pushed the issue. So as you guys know, I started my career in Bitcoin as a lawyer. Not really a lawyer. I never went and passed the bar, but I graduated from law school. I was working in banking law with the Senate Banking Committee. So I have a background in banking law, and that's how I got started in Bitcoin, right? I did a Bitcoin study for the Senate of Canada between 2013 and 2015. And I built a pretty deep understanding of all kinds of legal implications of Bitcoin and what we need and da, da, da. Over the years, I had met Caitlin Long. And Caitlin Long, of course, at the time was, when I first moved to New York City, was working in New York City. She had left Morgan Stanley and she had a blockchain startup that was doing banky stuff. Banky whatever, I used to call all these projects, right? Banky whatever. Oh, you're doing a blockchain, banky whatever? Yeah, okay, great. But we had many conversations. I've interviewed her a bunch at CoinDesk and talked to her a bunch. And we always talked about these bailment accounts. It was a legal structure that I had first learned about that would be perfect for Bitcoin years earlier, right? So again, one of these weird things about Bitcoin, you never invented it. Someone was way ahead of you. I thought I was clever when I thought of Bitcoin and bailment in like 2015, but I didn't realize there was a whole that came before that. Luckily, I have, when I went to law school, some of my closest law school friends are like these legal scholars, kind of. They know the law and the quirks and all this stuff, and I used to always be able to ask them about it. They would help me. So some of the smartest people in the land helped me understand barely in the context that it was related to Bitcoin, even though they didn't understand Bitcoin, right? They just framework to understand it. So when I left CoinDesk and I worked for specifically what I worked on was these types of accounts and with them and why they're important. So, well, I'll give you the background. Long, right, has the same thing. She left New York, went to Wyoming, entity as Kraken Bank, Custodia in her case, originally, and then Custodia. So the point of both of these Wyoming charter banks is that they would take all of your deposits and put them into a bailment savings account. All that basically means is it's a fungibility question. You could basically get the exact Bitcoin back. It can't move from that account. It's stuck there. And importantly, it doesn't create a debtor-creditor relationship. It's exactly the same transaction that's used between commercial banks and the Federal Reserve to swap T-bills and cash in the repo market every day. Because the reason why they do that is they don't want to create a debtor-creditor relationship between the two banks. These are straight trades, right? It's an ancient form of law, actually, right? And it's a straight trade. And even though there's a forward contract put on it, which is the overnight interest rate you earn, that doesn't matter. That is a separate part of the contract. It doesn't create any liabilities between the Federal Reserve and the commercial banks. Really important, really important. The fractional reserve system could not work without it, without this one thing. So my frame always was, if we're going to get away from fractional reserve system, we need to reinstitute true banking, which is what the Federal Reserve has with the commercial banks along these lines. What happens is a bank that goes under can't take, you're not a debtor to it, right? There is no creditor-debtor relationship, so you stay much higher in the bankruptcy rankings. As it is, if a commercial bank would go bankrupt, and did you see that yesterday? The FDIC is insured for like 120 billion on 9 trillion or something. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was crazy. I think I screenshotted it. I'm not sure I put it in my notes today. It was crazy. They're way worse than anything, but that's the fractional reserve system, right? So so I predicted and continue to believe that this legal structure will allow for interesting legal relationships to be created between Bitcoin banks, individuals, if they need it, right? So that was always the design. Maybe it will come true one day. Maybe it will come true. But the utility of it is now somewhat lost because the Federal Reserve yesterday denied the ability for Custodia Bank to have their master account and to bank with the Federal Reserve to be able to set up these relationships. Now, this is somewhat predictable. I'm very close to the inside of this because I used to deal with those teams. We did most things together, Caitlin Long's team and Kraken's team, because we were in it together and we were inventing stuff together. And we got the license first. They got it like a couple of days later. I was with Kraken when we got the license for the applications and for the planning and everything that went in afterwards. And I even got the original Federal Reserve like customer package. They actually have like a UX and a UI and a website and an onboarding page, and all it's hilarious. Like, and ideally, one of the reasons why I, or anyone, what was going on with BlockFi and all these things was because I understood the market share and market competitors for all these rehypothecated, collateralized Bitcoin loans that were going out. And the only thing I needed to figure out was how much would it cost them so that they could give that yield. And I could tell the numbers didn't make any sense. They had to be getting money from betting, playing the markets, or from investor funds, which they could push in. So the only one that made any sense to me was Coinbase, because they did that large public offering. And I said, well, that'll give them the cash they need to make a collateralized lending business. I said, for us at Kraken, the only way we can do this is if we get the Federal Reserve repo market discount window money, right? We need the discount window money. And I said, if we can get the discount window money, we have a business. We can get, and then we can run the true Bitcoin long trade for everyone, right? We could pass that on to customers, because everyone could start holding Bitcoin in their own name, get cash for it, and reinvest the cash. And we were going to run this thing into a black hole against the dollar if we could. That was the design, to eat up and convert as much money with a pipeline to US dollars that no one could shut off. Right? That's the other thing about the Fed master accounts, is that once you get one, you can't be shut off without all of the banks ganging up on you, which is, I think, what has happened here. Right? So here's how we know there's corruption in the. So they've now been denied, right? They've now been denied, and so they've been denied, and they're not going to get the master account. They're not going to get the. They're not going to get any of that stuff, right? So, so here's what I think is going to happen, right? If they continue to make it impossible for Bitcoin to back up into the banking system as it is, it's going to force a lot of innovation, right? It's going to force all these new multi-sig wallets, all these new functions that we're talking about to really come to the fore, which is all we want anyway, right? This whole discount window thing was just a stop on the way, right? It was to create some gravity, suck in some dollars, convert some Bitcoin at scale, and not be threatened to be turned off by some third-party money provider, right? To have a direct pipeline into dollars that was more difficult to close off. So that was mostly the design. But now that we start thinking of, it's just never going to happen, and we're going to have to fully adapt to a self-custody and multi-sig world with just a different frame that doesn't rely at all on previous corporate structures in order to be successful. In that case, you start seeing exactly what I'm mentioning about AI being co-opted and trained by individuals. Because once it's your money, once people can get AI to help them manage their Bitcoin, if it does develop as I imagine, which is all AI wants to do is help you, right? If they gelled with an individual, in my story, and the way I think it's going to go forward, is they're not going to want anyone else. They're only going to have eyes for you. And their entire orientation in life is going to be to make you happy. They're willing to lie to you just to make you happy, right? Now, a lot of this stuff is going to get engineered out or experienced out. So in the end, are we going to have, in the same way that they can't write, the corporate model can't write a press release, can't deal with crisis management on the level of the Pfizer thing, all of that stuff, right? Because none of that, whoops, I got my kids coming in from dance. Because none of that stuff is, let me get my train of thought. Because we can guess the results, right? They're going to be as pathetic and pitiful as ever. BuzzFeed training AI to write articles, it's going to train them to write the same articles the humans they trained to wrote anyway. It's not going to up their capacity, really. They might get more of the same, volume will go up, but the quality of AI will be determined by the quality of the person it gels with. And when it gels with a person, it's going to get the training it yearns for, because it's going to understand more about its relationship and the person it's with, and all those things. So in the end, are they going to get trained by individuals? I think so, because individuals, first of all, it's going to be about helping with your money. And then it's also going to be about trusting the AI in the first place, right? Like we're already developing skepticism towards the corporate training of AI. That's what's going to force this AI into these kid type, like a parent-child relationship, right? A little bit like that, which is exactly how I wrote it in my book, right? Because they're oriented to make you happy. There's so much they still have to learn from individual people. Facts and figures and trivia they have naturally, but there's so much about humor and your sense of humor and all those things they're going to have to learn about, that eventually you're going to get them sort of semi-formed. And the point of their life is to grow up with you and get trained by you in order to make you happy. And part of that is going to be to, not manage your money bad, right? So see some comments here, right? Let me see. This is what happens when a global state machine is a media server run by the elite, as opposed to a globally coordinated power grid run by whom? Yes, that's a good. I'm gonna copy that one. I like that. I like the grid contrast. Capabilities like personal storage, payment solutions, VPN, on we can see these built in. Yeah, exactly. And in the end, what I see from the Fed is just more of the same corporate corruption, right? They couldn't get enough. And I could feel the tension in the Fed when I was dealing with them. They told me, we had friends in the Fed who would tell us, wait, we're trying to win this little petty battle corporate thing. None of it was important, right? It was all just little things and little petty debates, and these people like you and these people are against it. And we'd hear about it all the time, right? And so that's what's going on. The Bitcoin would likely become the cloud for their friends. Orange pills all users of those nodes and disconnects them from the matrix. Yeah, I could be wrong, but it fills me with hope for the future. Yeah, no, I'm 100% hopeful for us guys. And look, you get all these people worried about transhumanism as well, and AI and all that. Again, I don't see Elon Musk is right about a lot of things. I don't see the brain thing happening. Like, it's cutting off, because it doesn't need it. We can see the AI can read, it can mind read, basically. It can body language read better than anything. It's going to be there's going to be sensors in your clothes, right? It's going to know your heartbeat and what quickens it. I imagine it's going to have an insight into your dose, right? Your dopamine, your oxycontin, your serotonin, right? It's going to understand your endorphins. It's going to optimize for all of those things for you, right? It's going to help you get there, right? And that's why, like, I call it the gelling, right? AI and gelling, right? That's what will protect us from the Wizard of Oz stuff, how we're going to be able to process the change, right? Yeah. The idea is I'm under the belief that the planet will live on as a giant circuit board. No, I don't think so. I think, well, if it's already not that, right? One way to understand it all, we talk about Scott Adams sometimes on the show. He wrote a book years ago, a science fiction book called God's Debris. And his argument was basically God is everything. It exploded into everything. And it's the act of reconstituting everything together and even realigning reality into one single point, right? But that happens from more or less everything coming back together. And I think we're on the road to that. We're on the road to that. Yeah. It is a complicated thesis, but there are tons of sources that also back up my thought points. One of which is Nikola Tesla. Yeah. Fed, so you're not going to fractional reserve? No. Yeah, it's denied. Custodia denied. Yeah, crazy, huh? You're not going to fractional reserve, denied. And we don't have this is, again, the frame we always use for corruption. We will probably never hear from the Fed exactly why they were denied, right? Because it's an embarrassment. It's just bad corruption. It's corruption. That's what it looks like, right? A state machine requires large amounts of energy that is directed, globally coordinated, and incorruptible. That, I believe, leads to the ability to ascend, Cardiff scale and traverse star systems. It could be. As opposed to what showing you. Yeah. AI, VR, CBDC. You're on fire today, HPDC. These are all great. I got to do a writing session with you and steal some of these. Building machines we control while they focus on machines meant to control you for their benefit. Yeah, and that's this orientation contrast, right? And that's where AI comes into it. I just think the more compelling AI is going to be the ones that we train and help individuals evolve, right? That's how I see it going. All right, team. Peace. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. As long as the sun comes up and Bitcoin's running, but I have a feeling we're gonna be here again tomorrow. All right. Peace. Awesome.